Hey settlers, I'm your host, Ben. And here is a hidden story that I feel needs telling. The unnumbered path at Westonbirt. Before you decide what this is, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this for attention. I'm not telling you this because enough time has passed that people have stopped asking questions. And that makes it feel dangerous again. I've changed names, not to protect reputations, but some of the people involved still live nearby. You might know them, you might even trust them. I'm not asking you to believe me, I'm asking you to listen. Most people think they've seen the Westonbirt Arboretum because they've walked the marked paths. They haven't. They've seen what the maps allow, the wide routes, the plaques, the benches, placed exactly where someone wants you to pause and admire something ancient without staying too long. I've worked there for years, long enough to learn the difference between woodland that's managed and woodland that's merely tolerated. Long enough to understand that some paths exist because people insist on walking them, not because they were ever meant to. The unnumbered path isn't on any map. I know that because I checked repeatedly. After the first incident, checking became a habit. You tell yourself it's professionalism, but really it's fear looking for reassurance. It begins near the edge of silk wood, where the plaques thin out and the benches stop appearing. There's no sign, no marker, just a narrowing of the leaf litter, pressed flatter than it should be, as if feet have passed that way often, but never quite recently. The first time I noticed it, I ignored it. The second time, I followed it. The moment I stepped onto the path, the arboretum changed its posture. That's the only way I can describe it. The birdsong dulled. The wind lost its direction. My radio crackled just the once and then fell dead. I remember thinking how polite the silence was. The path itself didn't feel secret. That's what unsettled me so. It felt administrative, sensible, like someone had laid out it deliberately and later decided never to mention it again. The trees along it were older than the neighbours, not in years exactly, but in attention. Their bark was darker, their roots broke the surface like knuckles pushing through skin. After a short while, I began to hear footsteps, not behind me, ahead, just out of sight. At first, I assumed another member of staff. We often passed each other in the woods without warning. But the sound didn't change when I stopped walking. It kept the same distance, the same rhythm. I called out, but my voice didn't echo. That's when I smelled damp wool. It's a very specific smell. Old coats, rain that never quite dries, the kind of scent you associate with photographs, not people. It made my stomach tighten in a way I didn't yet understand. The path opened into a clearing I had never seen before. And that matters because I knew the Arboretum well, or at least I thought I did. The ground there was never worn smooth, chalk compacted in something almost polished. No grass, no leaf litter, just bare earth, as if people stood there for a very long time, waiting. At the centre stood a tree I couldn't identify, not because it looked alien, but because it looked undecided. Its leaves didn't move in the breeze. There was no breeze. Its bark didn't quite catch the light. There wasn't direct light. When I looked at it directly, my eyes slid away, like they couldn't agree where its edges were. Everything seemed hazy. That's when the whispering started. Not voices, not words, more like breath. passing through mouths that had forgotten how to shape sound. It came from the trees, from the ground, from the space just behind my ears. I understood then that the path wasn't hidden. It was selective. When I turned back around, the way that I came through seemed to have folded in on itself. Not dramatically, just wrong. The bend I remembered wasn't there, and it should have been. The trees stood closer. I became aware, very calmly, that if I panicked, I wouldn't leave. That thought wasn't mine. It was offered. I don't remember leaving the clearing. I remember being back on the marked path, boots soaked, heart racing. My radio crackled back into life, as if nothing had happened. My watch had lost nearly an hour. I didn't report it. I told myself that was professionalism. That's not everything I needed. That not everything needed to be logged. But the truth is, I was afraid that if I wrote it down, the Arboretum would know I'd noticed. After that, I started listening more closely, to conversations, to half-finished sentences, to the way people went quiet when silk wood came up. That's when I learnt about the botanist. He was visiting, academic, methodical, the sort of man who took notes obsessively and trusted labels too much. He asked questions about certain trees, said some of them felt misremembered, like they were pretending to be something else. On his final afternoon visiting us, he asked about a secondary route that didn't appear on his map. I told him I didn't know what he meant. He smiled like he didn't believe me. He went looking for the path. But unfortunately, he never came back. At first, no one really panicked. Westonbirt loses people briefly all the time. Visitors wander, phones die off. People underestimate how long some paths can take. There's a protocol for this very experience, and everyone involved knew their role. Radios crackled, names were called, staff split up and walked the routes calmly, professionally, assuming they'd find him sitting on a bench somewhere, embarrassed and maybe slightly cold and damp. By late afternoon, that confidence had thinned somewhat. When his phone went straight to voicemail and his car was still in the car park, the duty manager made the call. The police arrived just after dusk. 2 cars at first, tyres crunching on the gravel, blue lights switched off out of courtesy more than optimism. Officers asked sensible questions. When had he last been seen? Who'd spoken to him last? What exactly had he said about where he was going? I remember one of them writing, quote, secondary route, unquote, in a notebook and underlining it twice. The Arboretum did not open the following morning. Uniformed officers stood at the gates while search teams assembled inside. Police dogs were brought in, then volunteers, then mountain rescue, despite any lack of elevation. The woodland was divided into grids. Tape appeared on trees, paths were walked slowly, then again and again. Every ditch, gully and drainage channel was checked. The places a man should be able to fall into were examined carefully, methodically. Yet they found nothing. But the third day, the tone changed. Officers began suggesting possibilities out loud. Stress, confusion, a deliberate disappearance. Someone mentioned London. Someone else mentioned the word walkway, like it was a diagnosis rather than a guess. The fact that his car was still there complicated those theories, but not enough to stop them circulating. By day 5, plainclothes officers replaced uniforms. Questions became more formal. Statements were taken. Maps were laid out on tables in the visitor centre, including old survey plans from the 1950s. Men stood where I had stood, pointing at the same stretch of woodland, agreeing quietly that there was nowhere a grown man could simply vanish. By day 7, the dogs stopped pulling towards Silkwood. I remember one of the handlers frowning at that, not alarmed, just puzzled, like a tool had stopped behaving the way it was meant to. 10 days in, the search was scaled back. Not officially ended, never officially ended, just softened. Fewer boots on the ground, fewer torches after dark. The press stopped calling, the police stopped asking staff to walk routes with them. The Arboretum reopened on the 11th day. Quietly, no announcement, no memorial, just gates unlocked. Paths swept, notices taken down. Officers remained visible for a while, parked cars, occasional patrols, but even that faded. His car was removed from the car park. Visitors returned with flasks and cameras. Children ran ahead of parents. The woods looked exactly as they always had. Life resumed. It always does. Officially, the case remains open. No body, no clothing, no evidence of a fall or an attack. No indication he ever left the grounds. Privately, the questions stopped. And that was when I understood something important. You can search a place perfectly and still not find what it has decided to keep. The staff stopped walking near Silkwood alone. Radios crackled more often there. Paths were subtly redirected. Maps were redrawn just enough to discourage wandering without ever admitting why. The unnumbered path mentioned in reports never was. You can't search something that doesn't officially exist. But I noticed it more after that. The way the ground stayed pressed flat. The way the air felt heavier, like it remembered being disturbed. The way a clearing sometimes smelt faintly of damp wool. I stopped working there not long after. But the path hasn't stopped me noticing. Sometimes I dream of the clearing, of people standing around the tree, not dead, not alive either, dressed wrong for any one time, watching. If you ever visit Westonbirt and notice a path that feels slightly quieter than the others, slightly narrower, slightly more expectant, don't follow it. Because the unnumbered path doesn't lead you somewhere new, it leads you somewhere the Arboretum remembers. And not everyone who is remembered is allowed to leave. Thank you for staying with me. If you got this far, you obviously like lost stories. Thusly, I recommend this story. Oh, why not give us a little like and a subscribe too?